This young man is Per Yngve Olin. He's alone in the house he shares with his bandmates. His stage name is Dead. This day was unavoidable. They don't just call him dead, he feels dead. He writes a note. "Excuse the blood. I wanted to do it in the woods, so it would take a few days before I was possibly found." His bandmate, Oystein Arseth, known as Euronymous, arrives later and finds the body. He's not upset, not in shock. He's excited. He hitchhikes to the near shop and buys a disposable camera. Back at the house, he places the knife and shotgun on Per's body and starts snapping pictures. They will be released on the cover of their bootleg album, Dawn of the Black Hearts. Now, it's easy to paint Oystein as a monster, and what he did to Per is despicable and makes that tempting. He grew up in Ski, a quiet suburb outside of Oslo. His parents were school teachers. In every way, he had what seemed to be a perfectly ordinary childhood. Nothing in his background explains his actions, which is exactly why we should look into it. To understand Oystein, you have to understand the world he grew up in. Scandinavia presents a paradox. Nordic countries are always in the top global happiness charts. They have strong social systems, high trust in institutions, and low inequality. But underneath that sit some of the highest self-harm rates in Europe. Drug abuse and alcoholism run rampant. The culture, specifically before mental awareness in the 80s, actively discouraged expressing any psychological pain. The happiness is real, so is the darkness underneath it. They coexist. In the months of late November to mid-January, there's near total darkness, and that darkness leads to elevated depression and aggression. Jantelove is an unwritten social law woven into Scandinavian culture. It loosely means don't think you're anything special, don't stand out, conform to society. For a young man seeking an identity and who decided the way to do that is to be the most extreme person in any room, the pressure of Jantelove was fuel to his fire. In that era, the Lutheran Church had lost its grip. Religion was cast aside, but society had nothing to replace it with. It left a generation of young men with no mythology, no ritual, no place for that inner darkness Norwegian culture would not let them express. Black metal filled that vacuum and gave them mythology, ritual, community, and meaning. The church burnings weren't random destruction. It was a signal to the establishment. None of this is unique to Norway. Heinrich Himmler admired Scandinavian culture so much he wanted to copy it. The SS was modeled on the ruins, the hierarchy, and the mythology of a pure Nordic bloodline. After the war, the Norse symbolism Himmler had adopted into his fascist regime became contaminated. Of course, it left a generation of young Norwegians who wanted to reclaim their own pre-Christian heritage with symbols that are now associated with history's most documented evil. Oystein Arseth built his identity in direct response to that landscape. He embraced Satanism, communism, and deliberately provoked every norm society enforced. Most people in Nazi Germany weren't monsters. They were ordinary people living inside a system that normalized evil, where the cost of not participating was higher than playing along. The black metal scene worked the same way. One of Euronymous' bandmates later said it was a contest to see who could be more evil. Euronymous didn't create that dynamic, he just built a room where he could no longer find the exit, where participating in extremes strengthened his new identity. And then Per arrived, a boy who was pronounced clinically dead at 10 years old, who believed, not as a metaphor, but as a lived reality, that he was a corpse walking through a world that didn't belong to him. In a scene built entirely on performed darkness, Per's suffering was the real thing. Euronymous recognized that immediately. It didn't help Per, though. He kept him close. The need to stick it to society was greater than the need to help an obviously disturbed young man. That's not a monster story. That's what happens when you give the wrong guy a couple of cans of gasoline and a match. But Oystein didn't invent this. Neither did Jimmy Page by buying Aleister Crowley's house, or Ozzy eating bats on stage. or the lyrics played backwards from Stairway to Heaven. Started with the sound, 2 notes, 6 semitones apart, splitting the octave exactly in half. Every other interval wants to go somewhere. It has direction, a pull, a resolution waiting for it. This one doesn't. It just hangs in the air. It opens the door and leaves it slightly ajar. It was a sound so unsettling, the church banned it. They called it the devil in music. The church claimed that sound, the tritone, summoned the darkness, always at the threshold, always lurking in the shadows, always offering something to musicians who had run out of road. And then, one night in 1713, a young composer woke up shaking. He doesn't know what just happened to him. He knows what he saw, he knows what he heard, and he knows with absolute certainty that he cannot tell a single soul. He picks up the violin. He has to try. He has got to get it down before it fades. His attempt is a pale shadow of what he heard, a child's drawing of the sun. He throws the violin on the bed and sits quietly in the dark. He's a man of faith. He believes in God, so he also believes in the devil. But why did the devil come to him? Not with fire and brimstone, not with a cloven hoof and the sulfur stench of every painting he's ever seen on every church wall his entire life. He came gentle as a friend, offering the most beautiful thing Tartini had ever heard, something he could never replicate. He named his botched version The Devil's Trill, and it was the best thing that he'd ever written. In 1713, the Inquisition is not history yet. Persecutions are common. Just a rumor of a visit from the devil bearing gifts ends with a noose. So he makes a decision. From that point on, everything he writes, he has to assume is saturated with satanic influence. He develops a code that won't be broken for another 200 years. Always music and personal thoughts, encrypted, all of it hidden, except for one note. On a surviving copy of the sonata, there's a single line in the margin, left where anyone could read it. The devil at the foot of the bed. 50 years he was celebrated across Europe as the greatest violinist alive. 50 years of knowing that the best thing he had ever written was a pale imitation of a sonnet composed by the devil. Near the end of his life, he finally told someone, not a priest, but a man of science, as if he needed a witness who wouldn't know what to do with it either. He said, "How great was my astonishment on hearing a sonata so wonderful, so beautiful, played with such great art and intelligence, as I had never heard even conceived in my boldest flights of fantasy. I felt enraptured, transported, enchanted. My breath failed me, and I awoke. I immediately grasped my violin in order to retain, in part at least, the impression of my dream. In vain. The music which I at this time composed is indeed the best that I ever wrote, and I still call it the Devil's Trill. But the difference between it and what so much moved me is so great that I have would destroyed my instrument and said farewell to music forever if it had been possible for me to live without the enjoyment it affords me." Tartini couldn't quit. The devil made him play. And he played for the rest of his life, knowing he would never be the best, not even close. A young man stands at the intersection of U.S. Route 61 and U.S. Route 49 in Clarksdale, Mississippi. The Crossroads. 6 days a week from sunup to sundown, his family picks cotton. They're sharecroppers. They don't own the field. They don't even own the shack they sleep in. As a bent, shadowy figure appears from the shadows, Robert Johnson holds up his guitar. He's determined. He will not be a cotton picker. He will be the most celebrated bluesman that had ever lived.
Woke up this morning, blues all around my bed. I could get gas and left me.
And he's offering his soul for it. In the 1930s, the Mississippi Delta is scattered with juke joints. It's not a bar exactly, it's a shack at the edge of a cotton field, run by someone in the community. It's a place where the poor black community come to unwind. They drink, dance, and listen to the blues. It's the only place that belongs entirely to them, with no white supervision, no plantation owner, no debt, no field. Zora Neale Hurston, one of the great writers of that era, said it plainly.
Musically speaking, the juke is the most important place in America.
Now, she wasn't exaggerating. The blues was born in these rooms. The men who played there weren't entertainers. They were salvation. At 17, Robert Johnson sits in the crowd. He's made up his mind. He's going to be a blues man. There's only one thing holding him back. He can't play guitar. Son House, one of the greatest Delta blues players alive, remembered him.
Follow me and Willie around on Saturday night, Willie Brown. And every time we stop for rest and sit there, little guitar over in the corner or something and go out to catch air, get the guitar and be trying to play it and be just noising the people, And the folks would come out and say, why don't some of y'all go in there and make that boy get that thing down, he's running us crazy.
Now imagine what that did to Robert, the one place where he could shine, be somebody, and they booed him off the stage. After that, he disappeared. Son House said for 6 months, some say a year.
Finally, he run off from his father and mother. Then he went over in Arkansas someplace. He was gone about 6 to 8 months.
After that time, he walked back into the juke joint, the one he left in shame. He looked different somehow, more confident, more mature.
So then he come back. When he come back, me and Willie Brown was playing out there, and he walked in. He said, can I hear the little tune? I said, nah, don't come back with that, Robert. I said, the people don't want to hear that racket. He said, let them say what they want to say. I want you to see what I learned.
He grabbed a guitar and walked on stage. People started booing before he played a single note. Robert calmly sat on the stool and started playing. The song was so real, so authentic, so beautiful, that the boos turned into tears.
Woke up this morning, sun wouldn't shine. Woke up this morning, that old sun refused to shine.
Son House said he was so good, when he finished, all their mouths were standing open. The other musicians had only one explanation. He must have sold his soul to the devil to play like that. Johnson told them that he went to the Crossroads at midnight and waited. A crooked man appeared out of the shadows. He took his guitar and tuned it. Then he played the most fantastic blues riff Johnson had ever heard. The man handed back the guitar, and from that moment, Robert Johnson could play anything he wanted. In the black community in the Mississippi Delta, the Crossroads meant something. Papa Legba, the gatekeeper between the living and the dead, the spirit who opens the door between the worlds, had crossed the ocean on the slave ships from Africa 400 years before Robert Johnson was born. Legba waited at the Crossroads. It was a symbolic place for lost souls, a place you went when there was nowhere else to go. Johnson wrote it into his music.
And the day keeps on burning. It's a hellhound on my trail, hellhound on my trail.
In 1936 and 1937, in the span of 9 months, he recorded 29 songs. And that's everything he left behind, because by 1938, he was dead, 27 years old. His death certificate reads, "No doctor, cause of death unknown." No one knows where he's buried, yet 3 cemeteries claim his grave. None of them can prove it. Before he plays a single note, they're already afraid. The rumors have traveled faster than he has. Women faint at his concerts. Men weep and can't say why. In Vienna, an audience member swears he saw a figure standing at Paganini's elbow during a performance, dark, guiding the bow. When he appears, the rumors suddenly make sense. He's assembled wrong. He's impossibly thin and pale like a cadaver. His black hair dances over his hollow cheeks as he plays. His eyes, witnesses say, burn like coal. His lips hold, as one critic puts it, a sardonic smile, as if he knows something about you that you don't. He's dressed entirely in black, and he doesn't carry sheet music. He moves across the stage in a way no performer has moved before, lurching, pacing, his body contorting as if something inside is trying to get out. His fingers are so long, so impossibly flexible, that he can play 3 octaves across 4 strings in a single handspan. No human being should be able to do that. At a performance in Liverpool, a critic writes, "You draw a deep breath after he has departed and ask yourself if what you've just seen and heard be not a dream." Heinrich Rellstab, one of the most respected music critics in Europe, is in the room at the Berlin concert of 1829. He writes, "I never knew that music contained such sounds. He spoke, he wept, he sang. There's something demonic about him. Goucher's Mephistopheles would have played the violin like this." Goucher himself attends a performance. Goucher, who wrote Faust, who spent his entire career thinking about what a man gives up when he makes a deal with the devil. He walks out of the hall exhausted. He says Paganini hit him like a meteor. He says he was entirely unable to unfathom its mysteries. Franz Liszt, the greatest pianist alive, himself a prodigy, watches Paganini in Paris and goes home shattered. He practices for 8 hours, then 8 more. He's trying to do to the piano what Paganini just did to the violin, but he never gets close. At a private performance in someone's home, a guest tells a story. A young man who kills his father becomes a criminal. He falls in love with a girl, but she rejects him. He takes her to the face of a cliff and then jumps. When the story ends, someone dares Paganini to improvise music to match it.
That story was quite chilling, my dear. Can our musician here improvise a tune to match?
Paganini accepts on one condition. He needs total darkness. As he plays his first notes, several women faint. They're sobbing. Then chaos. As they light the candles one by one, guests are found scattered, hiding in corners, crawled under tables. The once pristine salon looked like a battlefield. The stories that follow him grow darker. Some say he murdered a woman, gutted her like a pig, and made his G-string from her intestines. If you listen carefully, her screams can be heard from the violin. The French journal Entr'acte publishes this. He's Satan on stage. Satan, knock-kneed, bandy-legged, double-jointed, twisted. Fall to his knees of Satan and worship him. The critic François-Joseph Fetti writes what everyone is thinking. In reality, everyone had noticed and guessed for a long time that Paganini and Satan were in the most intimate relationship. That is, provided they are not one and the same thing. Paganini is aware, he reads these things, but he never denies them. Paganini's health had been declining from a young age. He had suffered mercury poisoning from syphilis treatments and tuberculosis, and now at 57 years old, larynx cancer has taken his voice. A priest comes to administer last rites, but Paganini sends him away. He says he's not going to die. A week later, he's dead. The church handles life and death, and now they face a question. Canon law is clear. The church cannot hold communion in death with those who in life were not in communion with the church. A man who refused last rites. A man whose association with the devil had been documented in newspapers across Europe for 30 years. A man who died without contrition. The Bishop of Nice makes his ruling. Paganini was guilty, godless, in alliance with Satan. There will be no burial on hallowed ground. His embalmed body lies on his deathbed in Nice for 2 months. Nobody will touch it. Then they move it to the cellar of his house. It stays there for over a year. After 4 years, the Pope authorizes moving the body to Genoa, but it's still not buried. 36 years after his death, his son finally receives permission from Rome for the burial. The body of Niccolò Paganini crosses Europe 9 times before it's allowed to rest. The most powerful institution in the world looked at everything this man was and decided his corpse was dangerous. His soul belonged to the devil. Every story up till now, the devil came to the music. Tartini didn't go looking, the dream arrived. Paganini didn't seek the legend, it attached itself to him. Robert Johnson went to the Crossroads, but the Crossroads was already ancient, already waiting. But now, for the first time in the story, someone goes looking for it, deliberately. Oslo, 1991. His name is Øystein Aarseth. He calls himself Euronymous. He opens a record shop and calls it Helvete, the Norwegian word for hell. The walls are painted black. Medieval weapons hang from the ceiling. A fake tombstone sits in the window facing the street. Young musicians from across Norway come to sit in the basement and listen. Euronymous tells them what black metal really is, what it demands, what it will cost them if they join. He tells the press that they are militant Satanists, a cult, that they seek to spread hatred, sorrow, and evil across the world. He criticizes the actual Church of Satan for being too humane. A young man who calls himself Insan of Emperor later said,
"I think that was very much to create fear among people. We wanted to be in opposition to society. We tried to concentrate more on just being evil than having a real satanic philosophy."
Faust, the drummer of the band Emperor, described the atmosphere.
It sounds really silly, but I think there was a little bit of a contest between them to see who could be more evil. With Euronymous, there was a lot of smoke, but not so much fire.
In the summer of 1992, the Fantoft Stave Church burned to the ground. It had stood for 800 years. It was the first of many. Over the next 4 years, more than 50 churches across Norway were attacked, and every solved case led back to the black metal scene. Faust himself killed a man in Lillehammer in August of 1992. He stabbed him 23 times. He was not criticized, not banished from the scene. He was respected. Euronymous puts the image of the burned Fantoft Church on the cover of a record released on his own label. He saw these atrocities as an opportunity, a marketing tool. In 1992, after the death of Per, Mayhem enlisted a new bass player, Varg Vikernes. Varg was a welcome addition and he was well known in the black metal scene through his one-man band Burzum. Soon after the honeymoon, rivalry between Euronymous and Vikernes came to a boil. They had different ideologies. Euronymous was a Satanist and a communist, whereas Vikernes was a pagan, a neo-Nazi, and a nationalist. Some theorize that Vikernes' anger over Euronymous' communist beliefs drove the feud. Others claim that Vikernes had grown to despise Aarseth for not being a real Norwegian because of his Lappish roots. I think it could just be two men's egos clashing, both claiming leadership of Mayhem. Either way, on August 10, 1993, Varg Vikernes drove from Bergen to Oslo. He went to Euronymous' apartment. Nobody agrees on exactly what happened inside, but Euronymous was found in the stairwell, stabbed 23 times, apparently trying to get away. Vikernes was convicted of murder, sentenced to 21 years. Till the end, he claimed self-defense. He served 15. 9 months later, on May 1994, the drummer of Mayhem, Hellhammer, released their debut album, The Mysteries Dom Satanas, about the secret rites of Lord Satan. The lyrics were written by Dead, guitar parts recorded by Euronymous, bass parts recorded by Vikernes. Euronymous' parents contacted Hellhammer. They asked him to remove Vikernes from the record, to re-record the bass, erase their son's murderer from the music. He said he would, but he didn't. He later said, "I thought it was appropriate that the murderer and the victim were on the same record." Okay, let's go back to Per, the one they called Dead. He was 10 years old when the bullies beat him so badly he ruptured his spleen. The doctors declared him clinically dead on the table, but after 3 minutes, they were able to revive him. When he regained consciousness, Per believed something had gone wrong, that he had returned from somewhere he wasn't supposed to leave, that his blood was cold, that he wasn't fully alive. Medical researchers have since published papers saying he showed every clinical hallmark of Cotard's syndrome, a rare mental condition in which a person believes they are a corpse, not mentally, but physically. He buried his stage clothes in the wood for weeks before a concert so they would smell like a grave. He kept a dead crow in a bag and inhaled it before going on stage. He cut himself and spilled blood on the audience, not to shock them, but to feel something because the dead don't have feelings. His bandmates knew all this. Hellhammer described him as depressed, melancholic, and dark. Euronymous said in an interview, "I honestly think Dead is mentally insane. Which other way can you describe a guy who does not eat in order to get starving wounds?" He knew, he watched, and he understood something before anyone else did. Pure suffering was the most authentic thing Norwegian black metal had. In a scene built entirely on performed authenticity, real suffering was worth more than anything else. So he encouraged it. When Per went to sleep in the woods to escape the synth music Euronymous played at full volume inside the house, Euronymous followed him outside. He fired a shotgun into the air all night to keep him awake. He sent Per shotgun shells in the mail as sort of a joke. Per suffering was the product, the driving force behind Mayhem. Not only does he take photos of Per's body, he makes necklaces from fragments of Per's skull. He gives them to musicians he considers worthy. To the press he declares that Per killed himself because black metal was becoming too commercial. Necrobutcher, the original bass player who left Mayhem after Per's death, later said he had been planning to kill Euronymous himself for what he did to Per. Violinist just got there first. The devil in music has always required an audience. Tartini needed a scientist to confess to. Paganini needed the crowds who came to see if the rumor was real. Robert Johnson needed the juke joint that had shamed him. Euronymous needed all of us. And right now, you're part of it too. You just didn't know until this moment. Okay, let's try to figure out what is actually happening. Your brain is a prediction machine. Every moment of your waking life, it runs simulations of what comes next. The caveman in us takes everything coming through your senses and asks one question: is there a threat? Music works by hijacking the system. A composer builds an expectation and then satisfies it, delays it, or violates it. The satisfaction is pleasure. The delay is tension. The violation is something older than music. When you hear a dissonant sound that doesn't resolve, the signal hits the amygdala, the brain threat detection center. The same structure that fires when something moves in the dark, when a door opens that shouldn't. Scientists have put people in MRI machines and played them dissonant chords. The amygdala activates every time. It's in musicians and non-musicians equally. It doesn't matter if you've studied music theory your whole life or never heard of a tritone before. The response is the same. It's not learned, it's wired in. The church didn't call the tritone the devil in music because of superstition. They called it that because it triggered something in every person who heard it, something that felt like a threat. Tartini heard the music in a dream he couldn't reproduce when he woke up. The dreaming brain works differently. The conscious filter is suspended. The prediction machine is offline. What comes through feels like it comes from outside because, in a real sense, it does. It comes from the parts of the mind the waking self cannot reach. He didn't hear the devil play, he heard himself, the version of him that he could not access. Paganini's body was the result of what we now recognize as connective tissue disorder. His joints were hypermobile. His fingers could span nearly 3 octaves. That wasn't inhumane. He was just built differently. Robert Johnson didn't go to the Crossroads at midnight. He went to a cemetery in Mississippi with a man named Ike Zimmerman, a place where nobody complains about the noise at midnight. They sat on tombstones and played guitar through the night. They played for nearly a year. When Johnson came back, he was a different player. The shame and rejection he had experienced in the juke joint had pushed him to play the blues beyond human limits. Euronymous didn't embrace the devil. He built one, handed it to a room full of young men competing to see who believed it most. Turns out one of them believed it more than he should have. So the science explains the mechanism, the amygdala explains the tritone, connective tissue disorder explains the fingers, Ike Zimmerman explains the crossroads, the dreaming brain explains the dream. And then there's something I can't explain. For 300 years across the globe, people with no knowledge of each other arrive at the same image, the same figure, the same encounter. The science tells us why the music produces that sensation. It doesn't say why the sensation always takes the same shape, why it's always a devil, not a monster, a ghost, or a ghoul, but always a bent figure in the shadows, smelling like sulfur, always at the threshold, offering something. I couldn't find an explanation for that. I've come to realize that the devil in music doesn't need to be real. It just needs an audience, and it always finds one.